So we got another situation. Got another situation. Shout out to Ewu for the video. And this one is one of those stories with a twist in it. So we got to pay attention to this one. This is the most twisted cases you've ever heard. Episode 3, documentary. Let's get to it.
23-year-old Molly McLaren had her whole life ahead of her, but just minutes after sending a text saying she felt like she was always looking over her shoulder, the college student was savagely attacked in broad daylight. CCTV cameras captured the shocking moment when police arrived at a crowded gym parking lot to find Joshua Stimpson soaked in blood. He willingly placed both hands on a police vehicle and surrendered as his victim bled to death nearby. What exactly caused the young man to snap so violently remains a mystery, but we know one thing for sure. When Molly downloaded a dating app, she could have never predicted the shockingly horrific turn her life would take.
Is it even safe to go to the gym anymore? How many incidents have y'all heard lately? I've been hearing a lot lately taking place at a gym. You know, always you've heard the little creepy incidences and stuff like that, but never past that. Now it's out of control.
Following high school, Molly began studying exercise science at the University of Kent with hopes of becoming a personal trainer. The ambitious student was undeniably busy, but she still made time for friends and even downloaded the popular Tinder app to find dates. Then, in the summer of 2016, Molly swiped right for a 26-year-old factory worker named Joshua Stimpson. The pair started chatting regularly, and after a few months, they finally agreed to meet in person. Molly expressed to her mom that she felt nervous, but said he appeared normal, and they began officially dating soon after the meetup. It wasn't long before
How can somebody appear normal that you're just talking to through text that you met on an app? This is where I gotta be hard on y'all, man. I gotta be hard on y'all. Because you have to be weary of everybody, and just too much doesn't mean somebody's normal. Somebody can definitely put on a charade or a facade for too much and have you thinking they're the greatest person in the world. No, be more strict than that.
Joshua began spending more and more time with Molly and her loved ones, even choosing to enjoy Father's Day with Molly's dad rather than his own. But it seemed strange that he never introduced her to his friends and always wanted to be at her house. As far as anyone could tell, he didn't seem to have many friends, if any at all. As Joshua and Molly grew closer, he eventually confided in her that he had bipolar disorder, though he was never formally diagnosed. People with serious mental health problems, such as bipolar disorder, have a difficult time maintaining long-term relationships because of their volatile behavior, which could explain why Joshua didn't spend much time with his family or seem to have his own friends. Over time, Joshua's interest in hanging out with Molly's friends and family dwindled.
Yeah, but why would you keep that from me? Why not say that in the beginning? First red flag right there, that you didn't come out and be upfront and open about that in the beginning. You held it.
Saying that he preferred her company alone. Red flags were going up everywhere, and Molly's loved ones were starting to sense that something dark was brewing under the surface. Her father later stated he just wanted her to himself and wasn't interested in making new friends or even dealing with Molly's friends. Isolating Molly from her friends and family is a major sign of an abusive relationship, and it can be a form of domestic violence. Other signs of social isolation abuse would be preventing someone from participating in social activities, needing to know everywhere they've been or are going, checking their mail, phone, email, and more, or restricting their access to transportation. Joshua became very controlling over Molly and refused to give her the space she needed to study or spend time alone with friends. He even quit his job when summer break began so that he could be with her all the time. Molly was irritated by his drastic
Stage 5 clinger. And then y'all see wedding crashers. Stage 5 clinger right there. You got to get away from somebody like that. It's only going to get worse. You got to get away from somebody like that. Yeah, stage 5 clinger. Oh.
Change in demeanor, but still wanted to make things work and encouraged him to get another job. Some believe her dedication to Joshua was based on the fact that he was her first real boyfriend. When this controlling behavior persisted, Molly told him that she needed some space from their relationship. Joshua tried to manipulate the situation by suggesting Molly was unhappy with other aspects of her life, not with him. Everyone was about to see a terrifying new side of Joshua. He accompanied the McLaren family on a trip to Essex to celebrate Molly's aunt's 60th birthday. At the party, her parents couldn't help but notice that he kept a very close watch over Molly and seemed upset when she danced with her cousins. Afterward, the family headed to an inn where they had booked separate rooms for the night, but soon after arriving, Molly's mom received an alarming message from her daughter. Molly sent a WhatsApp message asking her mom to come to their room because Joshua was playing up. Both Joshua and Molly were clearly distressed over a disagreement when she arrived. Her mom quickly gathered that Joshua had been taking videos of Molly without her consent during the argument and was trying to use them against her. Another sign of social isolation abuse is attempting to make someone look bad or ruin your reputation, which may have been what Joshua was trying to do to Molly. That was the final straw for Molly, and after 4 months together, she told her mom that she knew the relationship needed to end. Still, she wanted to wait for the right moment to protect his feelings, but during a night out with friends, it all came crashing down.
Ladies, on top of the fact that a lot of women get into these situations because they think they can fix that person. They turn into the fixer. Oh, I can fix him. He just needs some more attention, or he just needs me to show him how to love, or he just needs this. Y'all turn into the fixer. And it ends up getting you into a bad situation every time. Stop being a fixer, ladies. Stop being a fixer.
Molly told Joshua that they were officially done, and as I'm sure you can imagine, he didn't take it very well. Leaving a relationship is the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim. Joshua felt like he was able to control Molly while they were dating, but he lost control of her when she broke up with him. Over the next few weeks, Joshua flooded Molly's phone with calls and texts, begging her to give him another chance, but she continued to hold her ground. That's when he took things to a whole new level, leaving hateful posts and accusations on Molly's Facebook page, even going so far as to tag her family and friends. In those first few weeks after they broke up, Joshua likely acted very remorseful, charming, and promised to change his behavior. This is part of the cycle of abuse, which draws victims back in. But when Molly didn't fall for it, Joshua was furious, which is when the hateful posts on her Facebook page started. Enough was enough. Molly's parents encouraged their daughter, who was now filled with fear and anxiety, to go to the police and file a report. Officers ran a background check on Joshua and found nothing, so they told Molly,
"You got to do more than that. The days of filing a report, filing a restraining order, all of that type of stuff like that, it's over. The parents need to come to her aid. They need to show up. They need to surround her with protection and love. They need to pretty much move in or make her come home. Either or. Until they know, until, let's just say until. And I know that's uncomfortable, but it's either this, that, or the alternative.
And her loved ones to block him on all social media outlets and report any additional abuse. Unfortunately, the disturbing posts carried on for several more days, so Molly went to the police again. Still, no further actions were taken to protect her beyond giving Joshua a verbal warning over the phone. Often the police don't take matters of harassment and stalking between exes as seriously as they should, because these crimes are relatively minor, especially in areas with high crime. However, these lower-level misdemeanor offenses sometimes can escalate and end in tragedy. Then, just a few days later, Molly went out to dinner with friends to celebrate her acceptance into a personal training program, but she was shocked when Joshua showed up at the restaurant. Molly was so uncomfortable that she left early. The goal of stalking is to scare the victim. Joshua started by flooding Molly's phone with messages, and then the stalking behavior escalated to showing up at her dinner with friends. The following morning, June 29, 2017, Molly went to the gym to practice for the upcoming program, but much to her terror, Joshua showed up too. Surveillance footage captured him creepily pacing up and down the stairs before entering the same upstairs room as Molly. He proceeded to lay out an exercise mat and work out very close to her. Molly hesitantly approached him before sending a worried text to her friend. At first, it was unclear how Joshua knew Molly would be at the gym, but apparently he had asked another woman to track her social media accounts and inform him of her whereabouts. Pacing shows that Joshua was in a high state of agitation. Molly left the room and frantically called her.
It seemed like he was trying to convince himself to do something. That's what that seemed like to me. Like he was convincing himself as to what he possibly was about to do or was going to do in the future, or maybe he was going to execute that plan now or later. I don't know. It just seemed like that pacing up and down wasn't for exercise. It was for execution.
Her mom, explaining that Joshua had shown up at the gym. Molly's mom urged her to head straight home, so after it was clear that he had left the gym, she ended her workout and started walking to her car. That's when she sent the chilling final message saying, "I feel like I'm looking over my shoulder all the time." Molly was still sitting in her car typing on her phone when all of a sudden at around 11 a.m., Joshua opened the car door and began viciously attacking her with a knife. She didn't even have a chance to raise her arms and protect herself before he severed several major arteries. Molly screamed and pressed on her car horn, but it was no use. A brave man walking his dog witnessed the assault and tried to intervene by pulling Joshua out of the car, but his legs were drenched in blood and too slippery to grasp. The Good Samaritan screamed at another passerby to call the police as he pleaded with Joshua to stop killing her. When officers arrived at the chaotic scene, they found Joshua covered in blood. His hands were severely wounded, with some sources stating he later had to have a finger amputated. Nevertheless, Joshua calmly said, "She's in the car, I've killed her," before putting his hands on the police vehicle and surrendering. He was placed under arrest but denied the murder charge on the grounds of diminished responsibility, saying he was only guilty of manslaughter. When Molly left Joshua, he felt very out of control. Abusers hate feeling out of control. When nothing worked to get her back, he made the decision to take back control by killing her. In his mind, this is justified because he believed that she had betrayed him. News of the horrific attack spread fast and sent shockwaves across the nation. But even more shocking was the brutal nature of the killing. A forensic pathologist stated that Molly had suffered a minimum of 75 knife wounds to her head, neck, and chest, and that her throat was entirely cut through. Joshua had deliberately finished the assault with a slicing motion to inflict maximum damage and leave no room for medical intervention. This type of attack is often referred to as an overkill. Overkill is the use of force or actions that go further than what would be necessary to achieve killing someone. Overkill is rarely seen in crimes between strangers and is frequently seen in cases that involve exes or family members.
See that now, this is where I become conflicted about the death penalty. Because in the heat of the moment right now, I'm forward. I'm super forward at this moment. You catch me maybe a week or two later, I might not be forward. But right now, hearing what he did to that poor, helpless young lady, how he stalked her, how he constantly harassed and did things to her, showed up like it's no. And then how many times? It wasn't just once or twice or three. He was in the 60s and 70s. No person. She lost her life. Her family's grieving. They'll never be the same again. You should never have to bury a child. She's gone. You're here. I have to pray about that one. I have to pray about that one. Because like I said, you catch me at the right time, I'm for, sometimes I'm against.
Joshua stabbing Molly 75 times would be a typical example of an overkill. Joshua claimed he had no recollection of the attack during the agonizing trial, and his attorney argued that significant childhood trauma left him with a personality disorder. However, the prosecution called upon a psychiatrist who testified that Joshua was focused and in control, with no sign of a personality disorder. Furthermore, prosecutors showed the court surveillance footage of Joshua purchasing a knife and a pickaxe just days before the murder, proving premeditation. But there was still one more shocking revelation. Someone can be focused and in control but still have a personality disorder. People who commit murder often have significant childhood trauma. However, it is unlikely that he had no recollection of the attack. This was not a crime of passion in the heat of the moment. He planned this well in advance and probably thought about it several times before it actually happened. He may have even had the knife with him when he showed up at the restaurant the night before, but the right opportunity didn't present itself. When he saw Molly alone in her car, he saw that as the moment to carry out his plan.
And please, you already looking over your shoulder. Lock the doors. Lock the doors. You were already looking over your shoulder. He might be, I know she probably thought about he might be in the parking lot because she sent that text. Lock your doors. In the car, lock your doors quickly. Turn the car on. Back into a parking space. Don't just pull into a parking space. Back into a parking space. That way, if you need to go, you need to go.
Unbeknownst to Molly or her family, Joshua had reportedly stalked and harassed at least one other woman shortly before they met. Alexandra Dale, one of his ex-girlfriends, testified that she spoke to the police 3 times about Joshua, saying he threatened to drown her and slashed her car tires. Yet
See why I say we have to go past that whole filing a restraining order? We got to do more than that. This is why. This is exactly the reason why.
according to several reports, the police took no action after these initial reports were made. In less than 4 hours, the jury unanimously found Joshua Stimson guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to a minimum of 26 years behind bars. Now, let's move on to our next case. Singaporean graphic designer Anthony Lur told reporters at his wife's funeral, "She's the angel, I am the devil." He was right. 28-year-old Anthony Lur met Annie Long when she was just 15 years old, and they were married 5 years later. The couple welcomed a daughter in 1997, but things were far from picture perfect. You see, Anthony struggled to hold down a steady job and was known to gamble what little money they had away. Not to mention, Annie uncovered several affairs between her husband and different women. Determined to save their marriage, Annie forgave him and began working as a real estate agent to help support the family. However, by 1999, the relationship had become unbearable, leading Annie to move into her mother's house with their young daughter. Distraught by the sudden change, Anthony tried to take his own life with sleeping pills. Annie temporarily returned to help him, but that didn't stop her from filing for divorce the following year. Threatening to, or actually attempting to take one's own life, is a common tactic of abusers to manipulate their partners into staying with them. Then, 9 months later, on May 14, 2001, Anthony asked Annie to meet him at a nearby park with their daughter so they could sign papers regarding their delinquent mortgage. The pair met, but there was a problem. No one brought a pen. So Anthony asked Annie to run back to her mother's flat to get one while he waited at the park, and she did, one last time. As 30-year-old Annie exited the elevator on the 4th floor, she was violently attacked from behind by an unknown assailant wielding a steak knife. Her throat was slit and she was stabbed several times in the neck and chest before her attacker finally fled the blood-soaked scene. Annie was swiftly transported to Tan Tock Seng Hospital, but she passed away a few hours later from her injuries. Detectives worked tirelessly, combing through every inch of the crime scene, but all they uncovered was a torn section of a newspaper next to Annie's body. However, when they searched Anthony's flat, they immediately noticed that his newspaper was suspiciously missing that exact page. Already looking pretty guilty to the police, Anthony wasn't doing himself any favors either. He was reportedly very uncooperative and even combative with authorities as he denied any involvement in the crime. The following day, Anthony attended a wake for Annie amidst a crowd of grieving family members and friends. He sobbed over her open casket and gushed to reporters about how they had shared a deep love despite his wrongdoings as a husband. As if that wasn't enough, he also agonized to the reporter, saying, "What if I did not ask her down? What if I had brought a pen? What if I had gone up with her? 1,000 what-ifs, but one reality, she's gone." He's putting on a show for everyone and acting his part of the grieving husband. He likely is enjoying the attention and is feeling in control of the situation. Meanwhile, the investigation intensified as forensic experts unearthed recently deleted messages from Anthony's computer between himself and multiple teenage boys. Wait, what? 4 days after the murder, police brought the 2 teenagers in for questioning, and it didn't take long for the twisted story to unravel. One of them was 16-year-old Gavin Ng, and the other was a 15-year-old secondary school student we will refer to as Z. Investigators were stunned to the core when Z came right out and confessed to murdering Annie Long, but they weren't terribly shocked to find out that he acted under Anthony's orders. 4 hours later, Anthony was arrested at his home and charged with abetment of murder.
You used teenage boys to carry out an execution for you? I didn't see that coming. In my mind, I was thinking, why are they even telling us this story right now? Because we all think that he did it. To which he did it, but he had somebody do it for him. Hence the whole nobody brought a pen, run upstairs to get the pen. I thought that was pretty odd and felt like something was going to happen. But I thought he was going to take the kid and run if she left the kid with him. Not. Yo. Y'all be safe, man. This is some sickos.
So, who were these young boys and how were they connected to Anthony? Well, the answer's all spelled out in front of a crowded courtroom in November 2001 as Anthony and Z stood trial together. As it turns out, Anthony took a liking to a small group of teenagers who often spent time outside a local McDonald's. He visited the boys frequently and eventually inquired about whether they would kill for money. They all thought he was joking at first until he offered up $100,000 and named his wife as the target. Anthony was gaining their trust and cooperation by visiting with them frequently. This indicates that Anthony was planning this for quite a long time. The boys were young and probably looked up to him. Gavin and Z also likely felt special as they were chosen by Anthony out of the whole group. The high amount of money was also very enticing. They also had a grown-up that they knew and trusted telling them that murder was okay. Anthony turned to Gavin and Z and explained that he needed their help carrying out the murder. He gave them detailed instructions on what to wear and how to kill his wife without being caught, even advising that they take her wallet to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. However, when Anthony took Gavin to his home and invited him to practice slicing into a bolster wrapped with newspaper, the young teen started having second thoughts. He told me the skin of the neck was as thin as a newspaper, Gavin later said in his testimony. Gavin allegedly tried calling Z to tell him about the terrifying training exercise, but he couldn't reach him. It wasn't until 2 days after Annie's murder that he finally caught up with his friend who, according to Gavin, confessed, "Anthony's wife, I do already." Gavin was never charged with any crime. There's no legal obligation for a person who is not a mandatory reporter to call the police about a crime that hasn't occurred, even if they have compelling reasons to believe it may. If this was not the case, perhaps Annie would still be alive today, and certainly Gavin would have been charged. On the night of the murder, after being fully prepared by Anthony with a list of do's and don'ts, Z rode with him to Annie's flat with a knife concealed with a newspaper tucked in his waistband. They went in different directions from there, Anthony to the park and Z towards the flat, but continued communicating by phone. As part of the calculated scheme, Anthony told Annie that he forgot to bring a pen. Z was waiting outside the elevator door and ambushed the mother right as she stepped out, fleeing down the stairs to avoid being seen. Z also told the court that Anthony had admitted to trying to murder Annie in the past, but his daughter's presence stopped him. Throughout the trial, Anthony appeared cheerful and would often smile despite the horrific circumstances. He maintained his innocence in the death of his wife. Furthermore, he told the court that it was all just a big misunderstanding and that the boys clearly didn't realize he'd been joking all along. I had to give him a target.
That should be all you need. That's enough for a confession to me. Nobody believes you was joking. That's all we needed to know, to hear you say that you were in communication with them about this happening and it happened. That would be all. Don't put me on a jury stand. I'm telling you now. It would have been case closed, case shut, all of that fast. Soon as I was just joking. No, you wasn't. No, you wasn't. No, you weren't. Nope. I think you're guilty. Can we go to lunch now? That's what type of time I would have been on.
It was more a challenge of their guts and to expose their bluff, he said. Of course, the prosecution wasn't buying any of it. Another possible motive was to punish his wife for leaving him and take control of the situation. As the judge sentenced Anthony Lehr to death, he remarked that the crime was a serious death match on the chessboard of reality, where the young men were to be his pawns and he, as king, would direct the demise of his queen. Anthony simply smiled at this comment. He was executed by hanging on December 13, 2002. Due to his young age, Z was spared the death penalty, but he was given an indefinite prison sentence. After 17 years behind bars, he was pardoned in 2018 at 32 years old. While this insane case has gone down in history as one of Singapore's most shocking crimes to date, it's important to remember the life that was lost. Annie Long was a devoted, kind, and compassionate mother who didn't deserve the fate that befell her, unlike her monstrous husband. Now, let's move on to our next case. When 23-year-old South Toledo mother Crystal Phillips left home to run an errand, she had no idea that her children were being left under the care of an absolute monster. 1 year earlier, Crystal separated from her husband, Jaquil Phillips, with who she shared 4 young children, 3 boys and a girl. Around 1 month later, Crystal started dating a new man named Kevin Moore. The 27-year-old was originally from Georgia, but had spent the last few years living in Florida and Indiana before relocating to Toledo. Now, Kevin might have been a breath of fresh air for Crystal, but he was by no means an angel. He had several run-ins with the police during his time in Florida, including a conviction for third-degree felony domestic battery by strangulation. Domestic violence is almost never an isolated event, so this prior charge is a huge red flag.
Ladies, if y'all don't get a Carfax or a human Carfax on a person, don't date them. Don't talk to them. Don't entertain conversation. Don't nothing. If that person can't come with a human Carfax, a list of everything that's happened to him, then, hey, I would go as far as saying y'all need to start running background checks, get fingerprints done, everything. That should be your first date. Let's go to police station. Let's get you fingerprinted. Let's see what comes back. I need to know what comes back. It's just like going to buy a weapon or something from the store, from the gun store. You got to get your fingerprints done, so it come your background check. That's how you got to do with people these days. You got to start there. You got to do more than that, but you got to start there.
The couple had been together for 6 months when, on February 5th, 2021, Crystal's mother asked if she could help her move some furniture. Kevin stayed at home to watch her 4 children, and before leaving, Crystal said everything seemed fine and that she and Kevin even kissed goodbye. However, when Crystal returned home an hour later, she found herself right in the middle of every parent's worst nightmare. Upon her arrival, Crystal began unloading boxes from a trailer parked outside. She said things felt completely normal at first, but 10 to 15 minutes later, her daughter Graciana came running out with a startling admission. The 2-year-old exclaimed that Kevin had given one of her brothers a nosebleed. Crystal raced into the home to check on her little boys, and when she got to their bedroom, she found a gruesome scene. All 3 of her sons were bleeding from gunshot wounds. "I was in complete shock," Crystal said. "I screamed bloody murder. I went outside and I screamed at the neighbors, like nobody heard anything. Why did it take for me to come home and find them before a call was made?" Crystal called 911, and while the order of these reports is unclear, Toledo police also received several other frantic calls, with one woman stating she heard screaming that the man shot the babies, and "I just heard like 10 more shots." Another caller reported to dispatchers that the suspect was armed and hiding in a van outside the residence. In minutes, countless police vehicles descended on the scene and formed a circle around the van. Kevin calmly stepped out of the van with the gun visibly lying on the ground nearby, but was quickly apprehended without incident. Meanwhile, officers and firefighters rushed into the home, but even some of the trained professionals weren't able to bear the horrific scene inside. It was clear that all 3 boys had extensive gunshot wounds, and unfortunately, emergency responders found that 1-year-old Gabriel and 5-year-old Amir had already passed away from their injuries. But shockingly, 4-year-old Ashton was still alive despite having been shot in the head. The little boy was swiftly transported to the University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, where he continued to fight for his life. The couple's daughter, Graciana, was uninjured and placed in emergency custody with her father, Jaquel. A neighbor later stated that she didn't hear the shooting at first, but after stepping outside, she heard several gunshots before witnessing Kevin as he tried to hide the gun in the snow. She also
Remember that question we was talking about earlier?
Yeah.
That whole whether or not I'll be forward depends on how you catch me. Ask me right now, and I'm telling you I'm forward. Ask me right now, I'm telling you I'm forward. Kids didn't deserve that. Did you see the picture of those kids? No kid deserves that. Ask me, am I forward? Go ahead and tell you I am. What? Whew. Even if you don't have kids, you got to feel this one. If you got kids, you're probably in tears right now. Because you couldn't imagine that happening to your own. Imagine what that mom had to come home and find. Kids who couldn't defend themselves.
also reported that she initially believed Crystal and her young daughter to be victims as they were lying on the ground outside. All of this happened very quickly if Crystal was only gone for an hour. Kevin may have killed the boys as a way of punishing Crystal, although if that is the case, it is somewhat surprising that he waited until she left in order to kill them. Making her witness the crime would have been more of a punishment. It's also possible that he was jealous of the attention the children received from Crystal. Another possibility is that this was not planned out in advance. Kevin had a history of extreme violence and was likely very quick to anger. Watching young children requires a lot of patience. All of this combined is a recipe for disaster. He may have become very agitated and frustrated in the heat of the moment and snapped. Ashton, who had been shot straight through his tiny jaw, was listed in critical condition at the hospital, but a few days later, they changed his state to stable. After being placed in a medically induced coma, the toddler woke up and started gaining minimal control over his hands, feet, and face. He underwent several surgeries but is reportedly recovering from the horrific ordeal. Crystal, who spent day and night at the hospital with her son, immediately fell under fire on social media as harsh allegations and even threats against her streamed in. However, she adamantly denied that Kevin had ever been violent towards her or the children, saying, "I really have no clue what happened. We weren't on bad terms, there was no violence, there was nothing." Still, some investigators believe the brutal attack might have been related to a fight between the couple earlier in the day. Kevin Moore was charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of felonious assault, and 1 count of attempted aggravated murder. He was held in the Lucas County Jail with a bond set at $5 million. As of November 2021, Kevin hasn't technically been found guilty and is currently only charged as he waits for a 3rd competency evaluation. He was previously deemed competent to stand trial twice before, but his attorney requested a different psychiatrist evaluate his mental status at the time of the offense.
I can't say I hate y'all attorneys, but bro, y'all get under my skin. How could you even defend somebody like that? And then come up with a argument in their favor to stand in front of a judge and try to prove? I don't see how y'all do it. I've heard people say that about attorneys before. And I'd be like, you know what? Everybody's, but in some cases, this being one of them. How do you do it? How do you do it?
Family members of the lost boys have held protests outside the jail, demanding that he stand trial. It is a long-held constitutional due process right in the United States that a defendant must be able to assist in their own defense. For a person to be deemed competent to stand trial, a defendant must be able to understand the proceedings. Mentally incompetent people cannot be convicted of a crime. The defendant's competency to stand trial is legally unrelated to their mental state at the time of the alleged crime. What is legally required is that they are competent during the criminal proceedings. Whether a defendant has a mental state defense such as insanity or diminished capacity is left to the judge with the help of testimony from mental health experts. While investigators are still struggling to determine a motive for the crime and are uncertain whether or not there was a history of domestic violence between Crystal and Kevin, it's important to remember that there are plenty of resources available to help. Some free and confidential resources available to help victims of domestic violence 24/7 include National Domestic Violence Hotline